Hey everybody, Brian here. I have finally decided to build a new computer. I've been putting it off for years. And since I'm starting a new YouTube series on homemade music, video, and 3D content production, I figured it would be a good way to start off that series by making a video on how it's all done. From choosing the components, to connecting them onto a motherboard, assembling everything together into a case, and then finally getting up and running with a dual boot Windows Mac system. Now, this won't be a quick video, it's not a YouTube short. Hey everybody, in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to show you how to build a computer, how to set up Windows and Macintosh, and you'll see a lot of disorienting flailing around of my hand and head, and some disorienting transitions, because that stuff's really important for YouTube videos. But, most importantly, I'm shooting this all vertically, because after millions of years of evolution that led to our horizontally oriented visual system, it's vertical content that you want to see. But I do have chapters, so you can skip ahead if you want to. So let's get started. The first step was choosing a CPU. I've gone with 14th generation Intel. This is the i7 14700K. I could have chosen the 14900K, which has a little bit better performance, but only marginally, and for the programs I plan on using for music, video, 3D production, performance increase is usually single digit, sometimes there's no increase at all. Also, it's known to work well on the Mac side. People are reporting success running Sonoma with this 14700K chip, so that's great to know. Now the KF version is the one that does not have an integrated GPU. So the K, this one has the GPU on it. And on the Mac side, a 14th gen Intel integrated GPU is not even going to work. But on the Windows side, some programs can take advantage of both the integrated GPU as well as a dedicated GPU. So I think it's a good choice for that reason. Granted, 15th generation is coming out in a few months, but 14th generation will work great for years to come. And there's a lot known about it, a lot known about how to get stable systems up and running, whereas with 15th gen, there'll be that break-in period where it's not entirely certain how to put together a stable system, let alone dual boot Windows with Mac. And even though Apple Silicon is kind of the way ahead on the Mac side, it works on Sonoma. It'll likely work on the next release of Macintosh after that, and maybe even another release. So we know there's still a future with Intel chips in Macintosh. What you will be losing out on, as far as I understand, are there are certain functions on new Apple computers that rely on their Apple Silicon chips. Maybe some AI features in certain programs. But I'm not too worried about AI. Maybe I should be worried about AI. Now, I have chosen a Asus Z790 ProArt Creator Wi-Fi board. There's a lot known about this board. It's considered a great board. People who have put together custom Macs are reporting success with this board, so that was a big factor in my choice. But the other thing is, it has an Intel network card that's known to work on the Mac side, so you don't have to buy any Wi-Fi cards or anything else. There's some instructions online for how to get that card working natively. And it also is known to support dual GPUs very well, which on the Mac side, we're typically only able to use an AMD GPU. On the Windows side, people tend to prefer NVIDIA. I'm hoping this GPU will work just fine. If it doesn't, I know I can buy a NVIDIA GPU and it'll work fine with this board. The board also can support 4 NVMe storage cards, which is great. And it has Thunderbolt, which I'm not using for now, but at least it makes it future-proof. And it has a number of other great features, network transfer speeds, up to 10 gigabits a second. So a very modern motherboard that will definitely be a great choice for a long time to come. Now, in terms of storage, I'm filling up all 4 slots with NVMe cards. 3 are Western Digital SN850X cards, and then 1 is a Samsung 990 Pro. These are both known as very good choices in terms of NVMe cards. Now, I sometimes do music and video work on my MacBook Air, so I've also chosen a Samsung T9 external drive, which is a very fast drive, and that'll help me transfer files between my MacBook and my Mac desktop with ease. Now, I've never backed up before, really. I've avoided it for some stupid reason, and you know what they say about not backing up. It's just a matter of when you're going to have a catastrophe. So this time around, I'm trying to be, smart about that. So I've chosen Western Digital Easy Store 8 terabyte and a 5 terabyte, which should be good for all my backup needs on both the Windows and the Mac side for at least the near-term future. Now, other components, obviously the memory. On the Asus website, there's a qualified vendor list, so they recommend that when you choose memory, look in that list and see if there's something already known to be supported. And in the case of the G.Skills Trident Z5, it's known to be supported, and I've chosen the 64 gigabyte variant of that, so two 32 gigabyte cards, which will leave 2 slots on the motherboard open if I want to upgrade memory in the future. And I've kind of glossed over the GPU a little bit, but I really need to talk about that. This is a AMD 6950 XT. It might seem like a weird choice because for the same amount of money you can get a much better GPU, but on the Mac side it's known as the best GPU that's going to work on a custom Mac. Maybe in the future the 7000 series AMD GPUs will work, but for now this is considered the best you can do on the Mac side. And it's still a great card. Now, this card, the CPU, they're known for running hot, so thermal performance is going to be a big deal with this kind of build. And that leads me to my choice of cooler. I'm going with an air cooler solution. I don't feel like dealing with these water-cooled solutions. And this is known as a fantastic choice, the Thermalright Phantom Spirit Evo 120. You can read about it. It's less than $50 and it's considered pretty much the best, regardless of price, air cooler system to get. Now, I've chosen a couple of accessories with it for thermal performance. A Thermalright contact frame for the CPU. So I'll replace the contact frame that's on the motherboard, as supposedly with this contact frame you get maybe a couple of degrees of better thermal performance, as well as a Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut paste, which supposedly is a little bit better than your typical thermal paste. So together, these two accessories might enable a little bit better thermal performance, which means you might have a better chance at getting your CPU to run at full performance and not getting throttled. These are most of the components. Also, a power supply. I could have gotten away with a 850 watt solution, but I chose a 1000 watt just to be safe in case I add additional hardware in the future. So this is the Corsair RM1000X. There's also a similar one, which is the Shift version. If you plan on getting a newer NVIDIA card, for instance, I would recommend the Shift because it already has with it the connectors for the newer 12V HPWR connectors that those new GPUs use. Even if you do have the kind of new GPU, this will still work. You just need to pay about $20 and get an adapter so you can plug in to those 12V HPWR connectors. So that's the main hardware, and then all of this is going to go into a Fractal Torrent case. Now, this case has a great reputation. It's known for being one of the best out there. It also has great noise properties, which, by the way, I didn't mention it, but this power supply is also known for having a good noise profile. So back to the case. The case is very well reviewed, a lot of information on the internet about this case, and it's known for being really good for air cooling. So now that I've talked about all the components, why I've chosen them, it's time to get going. Okay, so here's the motherboard. This is where we will begin. You see the 4 slots for the 4 memory cards. We have a slot for the CPU. 1, 2, 3, 4 slots for the NVMe storage cards. We have 3 PCIe slots. On the perimeter, we have everything you would need to connect to a case. So case fan, CPU fan, as well as power, reset switch, USB connectors, everything that typically you find in a case is connected through here. I'll get into these in more detail when we actually put everything together. And then we'll take a look at the rear. Here we have display port connections, HDMI, USB Type-C, and your typical USB regular connections, Ethernet connections, audio, Wi-Fi antenna. Also, what else comes with it? Obviously, manual. You have a Wi-Fi antenna. You have these plastic pieces that'll help make a NVMe card sit well against the heatsink. This little plug, which apparently will connect over here. This is for connecting to the case, various things like the power switch, speaker, SATA cables, which I won't be using, extra connectors for NVMe card, and really short display port cable, which is for connecting a GPU to the display port connection on the back, which will then allow you to connect via Thunderbolt additional monitors. I won't be doing any of that, so that cable will just be put off to the side. Now we're going to replace the contact frame that came with the motherboard with the Thermalright contact frame. So the first thing we do is remove this black piece here on the top, and we push this arm outward, and then it pulls up, and then we remove this assembly. So now we'll actually put in the CPU, and there's only one way it'll fit. And you can see how these slots here line up here. And now we take Thermalright contact frame, simply place it right over, and then using those same screws that we just removed, we connect the contact plate. And that's it. So we now have the Thermalright contact frame in place, and we're ready to go on to the next step, which is to get the CPU cooler in place. Now we're going to talk about the Phantom Spirit 120 Evo cooler. Now, when you first open this thing up, you're going to see a whole bunch of different components. Now, what I'm showing here are all the components that you need to put this into a motherboard that's taken a 14th generation Intel chip. So you can ignore all the other parts. Some of them are for AMD chips or other type of Intel chips. What we have here, the main part, of course, the heatsink itself, 2 fans and the cables needed for power, as well as for the RGB strips that are in the fans, a Y cable that will allow you to connect the power of both fans to one header on the motherboard, some brackets for the CPU, screws, bolts, a back plate, brackets for the fans, and that's about it. So now we'll go back to the motherboard and get this all set up. So the first step is to put on the back plate. Now make sure you align to where it says 1700. So we'll flip the motherboard. Now we line up these 4 holes, and then flip it back around. Now that we have the back plate in place, we'll attach these bolts. I don't know if you can see that okay. On one side, it's indented a little bit. The other side is more flush. The manual doesn't say anything about which side to use, how to place it, but maybe for putting on the bracket next, it'll be easier if we have the indented end facing up. So that's how I'll connect these. Okay, now that we've done that, we take these brackets, place them like so, and then we take one of these little screws, and that's how we connect the bracket. Same thing with the other one. And now we're ready for the next step, which is to apply the thermal paste. So here's what my version of the Thermal Grizzly Cryonaught comes with. Yours might come with an applicator. Mine just has the instructions, a syringe, and a spatula. So now I'm going to clean the CPU to prep for the application of the paste. There are a lot of discussions online about the best way to apply thermal paste, and for the most part they all result in very similar results, so it's not worth it really stressing over the best way to do it. In the manual for the Thermal Grizzly Cryonaught, it offers you an option A, which is to use the included spatula and spread it evenly over the top of the CPU. There's also an option B, which says to just draw an X and then let the weight of the heatsink spread it evenly. And there are various tests online with people showing that the X method results in an even spread, pretty similar to manually spreading it with a spatula. The only downside is that it will likely push some of the paste over the edge of the top of the CPU. Now, because I'm using the Thermalright contact frame, any spillage is just going to end up on that contact frame, and for me in this situation it's not a big deal, just something to think about. So I'm going to take the syringe and just draw an X, trying to make that X as even as possible. It's not the best application of an X, but you know, I think there are other parts of the whole thermal performance equation that will be more important in the long run, like the case and other considerations, so we'll consider this good enough. And now we're going to put the heatsink on top very carefully. So now we line up the heatsink like so. And then tighten this spring-loaded connector. And after we've connected the heatsink, now we are ready to connect to the fans. And they'll pop out easily, so you just have to be careful. So when it's time to actually mount the fans, you'll just have to carefully hold both brackets to keep tension, otherwise the brackets will pop out. Same with the other fan. So now I'll attach the fans to the heatsink. Now notice here how we have things aligned. We have it so that the Thermalright logo is actually on the side of the fan that's not visible, facing this way. Also, we have these cables down low that'll help us with the connections. So this will ensure airflow going this direction towards the rear of the case. That's it for this video. In the next video that I expect to have out in a day or two, we'll continue with this computer build. We'll get the RAM installed, and I'll show you one pitfall to look out for regarding the CPU cooler fan. And we'll also get the NVMe cards installed. So keep on the lookout for the next video and keep watching.